You need to leave now. You're not even remotely close to being my real father." The words shot through the air like shrapnel, sharp and unforgiving. The grandeur of the high-ceilinged living room, bathed in sunlight pouring through crystal-clear windows, couldn't soften the sting in Natalie Hartman's voice. Standing by the massive oak doorway was Malcolm Price, a 63-year-old man, clutching a weathered suitcase with a leather strap and an expression carved from heartbreak and restraint. In the sprawling Los Angeles estate, a house whose very foundation he had helped lay, he now stood, being cast out like a stranger. The same man who had juggled late-night shifts and grueling manual jobs to ensure Natalie had the best education and a privileged life was now being told, with cold finality, that he was no longer welcome. 2 decades ago, when Natalie was just 5 and trembling in the back seat of a police cruiser, her parents had just perished in a car accident. No family member stepped up. Friends evaporated like mist. Only one person had the courage and heart to take her in, Malcolm, the family driver. No blood relation, no legal obligation, just an unbreakable promise he made to her mother and father when they were still alive. "I made a vow to your parents when they were barely older than you are now, Natalie," Malcolm said, his tone calm but weighted with memories. "They asked me to watch over you, to love you like my own, and I did." Natalie didn't flinch. Her lips tightened, her manicured fingers curled into fists at her sides. "And you did," she shot back, her words like ice. "You did your duty. Now you're done. I'm 29. I'm a successful attorney. I live in a mansion. I'm engaged to a man with wealth beyond your comprehension. I don't need a charity case lingering in my life anymore." Malcolm absorbed her words like a man standing in the rain, saturated but unmoved. He didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her with a mournful softness that only made her angrier. From a velvet armchair near the fireplace, Brandon Lockwood, 36, watched with detached amusement. Brandon, the man Natalie was marrying, was the heir to a luxury resort empire. His designer loafers tapped softly against the Persian rug as he chuckled. "Finally," Brandon said under his breath, his voice thick with condescension, "it's about time you told him. You deserve more than this old ghost hanging around." Ever since Brandon entered the picture 2 years ago, Natalie's behavior toward Malcolm had morphed into something colder, more distant. At social galas, she no longer introduced Malcolm as her father. He became the man who helped raise me. Eventually, he wasn't invited to her work celebrations or holiday dinners. Malcolm noticed it all. The averted eyes, the whispers, the stares that lingered just a second too long. He saw how Natalie looked ashamed when her affluent friends asked who he was. "They talk," Natalie said now, her cheeks flushed with frustration. "They ask questions, like why someone like me would still live with someone like you. It's humiliating." "Nothing personal, Malcolm," Brandon interjected, sipping from a crystal tumbler of whiskey. "But image matters, especially in our world." Malcolm nodded slowly, absorbing every word. The long nights working as a janitor to pay for Natalie's SAT prep classes. The years of wearing secondhand clothes so she could attend the best private schools. All of it had come to this. "Just go," Natalie commanded. She pointed at the suitcase as though she couldn't bear to look at it. "And take those ridiculous childhood pictures off the walls. They're not part of my story anymore." Malcolm's eyes traveled to the mantel. Once, it was lined with framed memories. Natalie's first ballet recital, her 8th birthday party, her high school graduation. Only a few now remained, pushed behind awards and plaques. He turned back toward the front door. "Okay, Natalie," he said softly, shifting the suitcase on his shoulder. He was calm, almost eerily calm. Brandon let out a small laugh. "Wow. No fight? No angry monologue? That's a relief." Malcolm didn't reply. He stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. He could still hear their laughter through the walls, but it no longer touched him. As he walked toward his beat-up old Ford parked at the curb, the weight of 24 years of love and sacrifice pressed down on his shoulders. But so did something else, a clarity that only comes when you finally see someone for who they are. The phone buzzed in his pocket. "Malcolm," Natalie's voice came through, monotone and curt. Don't forget the garage. Brandon's converting it into a gym. He closed his eyes for a beat. That garage was his project. A weekend after weekend labor of love. He had built it with his own hands, so Natalie could have a playroom and later a study nook. Understood, he replied. Oh, she added, almost as an afterthought. And stop visiting my office. My partners don't like the confusion it causes. He said nothing. The silence stretched long before she hung up. Malcolm drove in silence. Past the tree-lined streets he had once walked Natalie down, past the schools he'd waited outside for hours. He parked at a modest cafe on the outskirts of the city, a place where he used to mop floors overnight to save for her tuition. Inside, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around him like an old friend. Malcolm Price. A voice rang out from a back booth. Robert King stood to greet him, a man who used to be a co-worker in their janitorial days. Now he owned a reputable private security firm and wore the confidence of a self-made man. Rob, Malcolm said with a faint smile. I heard what happened, Robert said, sliding into the booth. I always knew you gave everything to that girl. How's she doing? Malcolm gave a resigned smile. Living well. Lawyer now. Engaged. And forgetting who got her there, Robert replied, shaking his head. Let me guess. That fiancé of hers has been sniffing around your finances. Malcolm nodded, asking questions. Lots of them. About estate planning. My accounts. My history. Robert leaned in. So? What did you tell him? Malcolm pulled out his phone and handed it to Robert. The screen showed a balance. Over $5.5 million. Robert's eyebrows shot up. You were holding this kind of wealth all this time? Kept it quiet on purpose, Malcolm said. I needed to know if love came with strings attached. Robert leaned back, absorbing the gravity of it. So what now? Malcolm's gaze was steady. Now I give them exactly what they asked for. I vanish, but not before they realize what they truly threw away. Malcolm sat at the corner table of the little coffee shop, a world away from the cold luxury of Natalie's mansion. Through the window, he could see the dull blur of traffic sliding by under the gray Los Angeles sky. He held his coffee with both hands, not for warmth, but to steady the emotion quietly trembling beneath his skin. The mug was chipped. The table was scratched. But here, in this quiet pocket of the city, Malcolm found clarity. Robert King sat across from him, elbows resting on the wooden surface, eyes fixed in disbelief on the screen of Malcolm's phone. You're telling me, Robert said slowly, that you've been sitting on over $5 million this whole time? Malcolm gave a small, sad smile. $5.5 million, give or take. Tech stocks, a few smart moves, and a whole lot of patience. Robert leaned back, whistling low. You always were the quiet type, but damn, that's serious money. Malcolm didn't look proud. If anything, he looked tired. I never wanted her to know. I never wanted anyone to know. It was never about the money. Robert studied him. Then what was it about? Malcolm met his gaze. I needed to know that she loved me without conditions, that I meant something to her regardless of what I had. And now you've got your answer, Robert muttered bitterly. There was a long silence between them, filled only by the soft clink of spoons on mugs and the murmur of other conversations. Finally, Malcolm spoke. She doesn't just want me gone. She wants me erased, like I was a blemish on her past, an inconvenience. She's a fool if she can't see what she had. Robert snapped. You sacrificed everything for that girl. I remember when you used to eat one meal a day just to save enough for her piano lessons. I never wanted thanks, Malcolm said. I just wanted to raise her right, make her strong, independent. You succeeded, Robert said with a grim chuckle. Too well, maybe. Malcolm shook his head. No, strength isn't just about career and money. It's about loyalty, compassion, gratitude. He pulled out a thin folder from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. I've been putting together plans, quietly, for a long time. Robert opened the folder. Inside were blueprints, financial projections, and a mission statement titled, The Price Foundation For opportunity, not charity. You're starting a foundation? Robert asked, his tone shifting from disbelief to awe. I want to build community centers, Malcolm said, his voice low but steady. Scholarships for underprivileged kids, after-school programs, mental health support, mentorship. I want to give kids like Natalie the chance to rise, but without losing their humanity along the way. Robert looked up, his eyes bright with respect. You're serious about this? Dead serious, Malcolm said. And I want you on board. You know the city. You've built something from the ground up. You understand what it's like to be overlooked. Robert grinned. Malcolm Price, you've got yourself a partner. They shook hands firmly. It wasn't just a business agreement. It was a pact between two men who had lived in the shadows, ready to step into the light. Just then, Malcolm's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from Natalie. Natalie, need you to meet with Brandon's lawyer tomorrow at 2. House title transfer. Just sign the waiver. Thanks. No greeting. No emotion. Just another transaction to finalize his erasure. He showed the message to Robert. She's not wasting time, Robert muttered. She thinks you're just going to roll over and sign your name away. Malcolm nodded. I'll sign, but not for the reason she thinks. What do you mean? Malcolm's eyes narrowed, his voice calm. Let her have the house. Let her think she's won. I've got something bigger planned. Robert leaned in. You gonna tell me? Malcolm reached for a napkin and wrote down a phone number. Tomorrow morning, call this number. Tell them you have a client interested in setting up a philanthropic investment portfolio. Quietly, Robert stared at the number. His eyes widened. Harrison and Company? That's the biggest private wealth firm in the state. I want them to manage the foundation, Malcolm said. But I want it done without my name attached until the right time. Robert nodded slowly, catching on. You're going to let them see who you really are. On your terms. Malcolm sipped his coffee. Exactly. The next day, the meeting at the law firm went as expected. Brandon's lawyer, a smug young man named Tyler Grant, greeted Malcolm with the kind of fake warmth reserved for necessary annoyances. The conference room was sleek. Glass walls, chrome fixtures, a view of the skyline that screamed power. Mr. Price, thank you for coming, Tyler said, gesturing for him to sit. Let's get this signed quickly. We have dinner plans. I'm sure you do, Malcolm replied, calmly taking his seat. The documents were dense. Legalese filled every line, but Malcolm had read them all before, twice. This transfers all interest in the home to Ms. Hartman, Tyler explained. We also need your agreement not to pursue any claim of equity, residency, or inheritance. Malcolm signed every page without hesitation. No flinch, no fuss. You're surprisingly cooperative, Tyler said with a condescending smile. I've had a lifetime of practice, Malcolm replied, standing. As he walked out, briefcase in hand, he passed Brandon in the lobby. The younger man gave him a smug nod. Malcolm smiled faintly. Let them think this is the end. Because deep inside, Malcolm Price knew something they didn't. His legacy wouldn't be measured in square footage or designer kitchens, but in lives changed. And he was just getting started. The morning sun crept through the slits of the blinds in Malcolm's modest hotel room. A clean white shirt hung on the door. His only suit jacket lay pressed on the back of a chair. Everything about the room was simple. No luxuries, no pretense. Just like him, Malcolm stood by the mirror, adjusting his tie with steady hands. Today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about pride. It was about something much greater. He had signed away the house, the legal rights, the memories, and now it was time to build something that couldn't be taken away. His phone buzzed. A message from Robert. Robert, call made. Harrison and Company expecting you at 11 a.m. today. They sounded intrigued. Malcolm smiled. This was the beginning. At exactly 11 a.m., Malcolm stepped into the lobby of Harrison and Company, a sleek, modern fortress of wealth management. Everything gleamed. The marble floors, the steel fixtures, even the air felt expensive. The kind of place Brandon Lockwood probably came for tax shelter advice. The receptionist looked up with polite curiosity. Mr. Price? Yes, I have an appointment with Mr. Harrison. One moment, please. Her tone shifted subtly, more respectful now. She had clearly been briefed. Within seconds, the double doors at the end of the hallway opened, and out walked Jonathan Harrison himself, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and a handshake built for making billion-dollar deals. Mr. Price, it's a pleasure. I've heard very interesting things. They moved into a private meeting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The chairs were leather, the table smooth oak. Harrison sat down, steepling his fingers. So, you've kept a very low profile for someone with your investment record. That was the point, Malcolm replied evenly. Harrison nodded. You rode the tech wave at exactly the right time. Your position in Centron AI alone is now worth over $2.3 million. Add in the others, you've done very, very well. And yet, no foundation, no high-profile purchases, not even a trust. I wasn't building for myself, Malcolm said. I was building for something larger, something real. Harrison leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. I want to launch a philanthropic initiative. Quietly at first, then more publicly. Scholarships for underprivileged youth, mentorship programs, community centers in low-income areas. I want to reach the kids who are like my daughter, lost, scared, overlooked. But unlike her, I want them to remember where they came from. Jonathan paused for a long moment. That's different. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Too different for you? No, Harrison said with a small smile. It's refreshing. Most clients want to protect their wealth. You want to use it. That money sat in silence for years while I scrubbed floors and worked triple shifts, Malcolm said. Now it's time it started speaking for something. That evening, Malcolm sat down with Robert at the same cafe. Papers spread across the table between them. You're moving fast, Robert said, impressed. There's no time to waste, Malcolm replied. We're setting up the Price Foundation. Harrison's team will handle legal, logistics, and investment strategy. But I want us in control of mission execution. You're not playing around, Robert said. This is real. It always was, Malcolm said, sipping his coffee. But now it's official. Robert leaned back, arms crossed. So what next? Malcolm's eyes sparked with the first trace of fire since Natalie's rejection. We're going to host a gala. Not just any gala. One that brings together everyone who thinks they know what success looks like and show them what real legacy means. A gala? Robert raised a brow. You gonna invite her? Malcolm didn't answer right away. He just smiled. 1 week later, golden envelopes landed in the hands of LA's elite. The kind printed on thick parchment with gold foil lettering. No mention of Malcolm Price. The host was listed as the Price Foundation with the tagline, a new vision for tomorrow, a celebration of those who lift others. The venue, the Beverly Grand, an exclusive country club where the champagne never stopped flowing and the waiters all wore gloves. Brandon received his invite while lounging poolside. Babe, did you see this? He said, waving the envelope. Natalie walked over, adjusting her designer sunglasses. What is it? Some foundation launch. Big deal. Harrison and Company is backing it. Black tie only. The list of attendees is impressive. She took the invitation, scanning it with interest. This would be good for us. Might be worth attending. Exactly, Brandon said. This is where real doors open. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The evening air shimmered with anticipation. Chauffeured cars lined up outside the Beverly Grand, their engines purring as sharply dressed valets opened doors with choreographed grace. Golden light poured from the ballroom windows, casting a honey glow over the manicured hedges and marble steps. Inside, the transformation was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in warm luminance. Tall glass vases overflowed with white orchids and golden roses. A string quartet played soft classical music near the stage, and servers floated through a room with trays of vintage champagne and caviar-topped blinis. It wasn't just another charity event. It was something else, more refined, more powerful. The kind of night people remembered. Natalie Hartman stood near the entrance, a picture of elegance in a custom navy blue gown with sapphire earrings that matched her eyes. Her hair was pinned up flawlessly. Beside her, Brandon Lockwood adjusted his cufflinks, his tuxedo tailored within a millimeter of perfection. "Tell me again who's hosting this?" Natalie asked, scanning the crowd. Brandon took a sip of champagne. "The Price Foundation. No idea who's behind it. But Harrison and Company doesn't back amateurs. There's big money here tonight." Natalie tilted her head. "The name Price sounds familiar." Brandon chuckled. "Honey, every third man in finance is named Price. Probably some trust fund baby who wants to give back." They drifted toward the center of the ballroom, exchanging pleasantries with other power couples, lawyers, influencers, venture capitalists. Everyone was there, and everyone was talking about the same thing. Who is Malcolm Price? "He's launching 3 community centers in L.A., one whispered. "He's pledged over $5 million to education initiatives. I heard he made a fortune off early AI investments. Anonymously funded 2 scholarships at Stanford last year. Quiet philanthropist. Invited Harrison personally to co-manage his philanthropic branch." Natalie's stomach fluttered uneasily. That name, that presence, there was something about it that tugged at her memory, but she pushed it away. Tonight was about her and Brandon making connections. At the far end of the room, the stage lights dimmed. The hum of conversation softened to a hush. The string quartet faded, replaced by a single spotlight and the tall figure of Jonathan Harrison stepping up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice rich and authoritative, "it's a rare privilege to witness the beginning of something truly transformative. Tonight, we celebrate not just wealth, but vision. Not just success, but purpose." He paused, letting the gravity settle. The man behind tonight's gala is not a CEO or a politician. He's someone who built his fortune in silence, who gave everything he had longed before he had anything to give. And tonight, he's pledged $5.5 million, his personal wealth, to help lift others. Natalie's wine glass paused midair. A strange coldness crept up her spine. Harrison continued, "It is my profound honor to introduce the founder of the Price Foundation, Mr. Malcolm Price." The spotlight shifted. The crowd turned. A tall figure walked slowly onto the stage, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, his face calm and composed. Natalie's heart stopped. Brandon's jaw slackened. The room went completely silent. Malcolm Price stood at the microphone, his eyes sweeping across the glittering sea of faces. He didn't need notes. He didn't need introduction. The silence gave him power. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady, deep and clear. "Thank you all for being here. I know many of you came expecting to meet another faceless millionaire trying to polish their public image. I'm not that man." He let that linger. "I built my wealth slowly, quietly. I worked janitorial jobs at night while managing investments by day. I cleaned toilets so a little girl could go to private school. I skipped meals to buy textbooks. I wore the same coat for 10 years while she got braces, ballet lessons, tutoring. And I did it with love, with pride." Natalie's face had turned pale. Her breathing shallowed. She could feel every pair of eyes in the room beginning to shift toward her. "Many of you may not know me," Malcolm continued, now staring directly into crowd, directly at his daughter. "But some of you do. Some of you knew me when I was just the help, the man in the shadows, the man who didn't belong." He paused. A whisper stirred through the room. "I was recently reminded of that, quite vividly, told that I didn't belong in a world of success, that I was a burden, that I was something to hide." Gasps rippled. Brandon took a small step away from Natalie. "But you see," Malcolm smiled now, "being underestimated is a gift. It allows you to build in peace, to grow without pressure. And tonight, I stand here not to call out anyone, not to shame anyone, but to show what love, perseverance, and vision can truly become." He opened a leather portfolio and held it up. "This," he said, "is the official launch of the Price Foundation, a multi-million-dollar initiative to build futures for children who've been forgotten by the system, who have no fathers, no mentors, no advocates. who just need someone to believe in them. Applause began tentative, then building into thunderous waves. Natalie stood frozen. Her carefully constructed identity, her world of polished perfection, felt like it was caving in from the inside out. Brandon leaned in and whispered, "You never told me that was your driver." Her voice cracked, barely audible. "I didn't think it mattered." "Well," he muttered, eyes on the stage, "it matters now." Malcolm took one final breath and closed with quiet grace. "I'm not part of your circles," he said, voice soft but unwavering. "But I've built one of my own, one that believes in rising by lifting others. And if any of you feel the same, my door is open." He stepped down as a crowd surged to their feet. Reporters scrambled forward. Donors rushed to shake his hand. And Natalie could only watch, not as a successful attorney, not as the woman of the hour, but as the daughter who had once been loved beyond measure and had thrown it away. The ballroom emptied slowly, like a tide pulling back to reveal what the waves had tried to hide. People clustered around Malcolm, offering cards, pledging donations, expressing admiration. His name buzzed on everyone's lips, not just a surprised donor, but as a force, a man of purpose, principle, and power. Natalie stood off to the side, rooted in place. Her glass of wine had long gone warm in her hand. Her fingers trembled. Her face, once flushed with pride at being the center of elite circles, was now pale and unreadable. Brandon finally broke the silence between them. "You knew," he said sharply, eyes still fixed on the stage. "You knew who he was. And you let me treat him like a nobody." Natalie didn't respond. "Jesus," Brandon muttered, rubbing his jaw. "We didn't just kick out some old man. We humiliated a millionaire, a public philanthropist. At the exact moment his influence is exploding." "I didn't know about the money," she said at last, her voice brittle. "He never told me." Brandon turned to her, incredulous. "Are you serious? You lived with him for 2 decades, and you had no idea?" She looked away, lips tightening. He was always simple, never flashy. He drove that rusty old truck, shopped at thrift stores. You thought he was poor," Brandon finished, biting off each word. "God, how do you not see the irony?" Natalie's eyes flicked around the room. People were still glancing at her, discreetly but unmistakably. The daughter, the lawyer, the one who disowned him, the one who threw away a man worth millions, not just in money, but in soul. Her voice was barely a whisper. "We have to leave." Brandon didn't argue. For once, he didn't feel like the man in charge. They drove home in silence. Natalie stared out the window, her thoughts spinning. She remembered the garage Malcolm had built with his own hands. The years he slept on the couch while she had the master bedroom. The lunches he packed for her, even when there wasn't enough for himself. The man who raised her without ever expecting repayment. And she cast him out, publicly, coldly. Brandon finally spoke, his tone clipped. "You said he didn't matter, that he was just your driver, that appearances were everything." Natalie swallowed hard. "That's what you said." He scoffed. "Don't pin this on me. You were the one who told him to leave, who erased him from your life." "I didn't know," she said, barely holding it together. "I didn't think." "No, you didn't," Brandon snapped. "You thought you were too good for him, too important." She turned to him, anger flashing in her voice. "Don't pretend you respected him either. You called him pathetic. That was before I knew he was worth more than both of us combined." Brandon shot back, and there it was. Not remorse, not humility, just greed, shaken by a missed opportunity. Natalie leaned back, silent again. Her chest ached, but not from guilt alone, from recognition. Brandon didn't love her for her values. He loved her for her image, her access, her success. And right now, that image was falling apart. The next morning, the fallout began. News sites and business blogs had picked up the story overnight. Self-made janitor turned philanthropist shocks elite gala. Malcolm Price donates millions to underprivileged youth. Man once cast aside by adopted daughter emerges as force for good. The photos told the rest of the story. Malcolm on stage, powerful and poised. Natalie in the audience, frozen. The headlines didn't name her directly, but those in her world didn't need them to. Everyone recognized her. Everyone knew. Her phone buzzed constantly. Texts from colleagues, vague emails from clients, murmured apologies or passive-aggressive remarks cloaked in faux professionalism. Didn't know your dad was so influential. Heard you two had a falling out. Awkward timing, huh? Bet the foundation's looking for a legal team now. Might want to reach out. Natalie turned the phone over and let it buzz. Her office felt too sharp, too sterile, like a room designed to keep emotion out. She glanced at the family photo on her desk, except it wasn't a family photo anymore. Just her and Brandon at some gala, all teeth and status. Every trace of Malcolm had been scrubbed out of her life, just as she'd asked. Across town, Malcolm sat at his desk in the Price Foundation's new temporary headquarters, a modest suite in a shared office space. Clean, humble, efficient. Robert walked in holding a folder. Press requests are piling up. CNN wants a live interview. A documentary crew from a university called. Also, Oprah's team reached out. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Oprah? Yep. Malcolm smiled faintly. Not yet. Let's keep it small. One-on-one stories. Focus on the kids. The schools. No red carpets. Robert nodded. I figured you'd say that. Also, one more thing. He placed a letter on the desk. Malcolm recognized the handwriting immediately. Natalie. He stared at it, unmoving. She must have delivered it here this morning, Robert said quietly. You wanted to read it? No, Malcolm said. Leave it. You sure? Malcolm nodded. She made her choice. I made mine. Robert hesitated. You think she regrets it? She regrets the fallout, Malcolm said. But regret isn't the same as change. Robert slowly backed away, leaving the letter untouched. Malcolm went back to reviewing the list of grant applications. His mission was just beginning. There were young people out there with potential, waiting for someone to believe in them. He didn't have time for drama. He had a purpose now. And nothing, not even heartbreak, would stop it. Brandon Lockwood slammed the door behind him as he walked into the penthouse, his jaw clenched tight. Natalie followed slowly, heels clicking like metronomes on the marble floor. The silence between them had grown since last night's gala, stretching out like a chasm neither of them wanted to cross. You humiliated me, Brandon finally exploded, turning to face her. Natalie blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? You stood there like a damn statue while your millionaire father torched the room with a speech that made us look like parasites, he said, voice rising. Do you know how many of my colleagues were there? Do you know how they're talking about me now? Her eyes narrowed. You're worried about your image? Really? Brandon scoffed. Don't play innocent. You're not exactly coming out clean in all this. You let everyone believe he was just some pathetic has-been, and you were fine with it, until it backfired. Natalie turned away, walking to the window, arms folded. Outside, the skyline stretched across Los Angeles like a glittering lie. I didn't know he had money. I didn't know he was planning any of this. You didn't care to know, Brandon snapped. That's worse. Natalie's voice cracked. You treated him like garbage, too. Because you let me, Brandon growled. You introduced him as your driver. You laughed at my jokes. You told him to leave. She sank onto the edge of the couch, shoulders hunched. He raised me. He sacrificed everything for me, and I threw him away. Brandon didn't move to comfort her. She whispered, I thought keeping him out of the picture would make my life cleaner. Simpler. Cleaner? Brandon scoffed. You mean more marketable. Her head dropped. She couldn't deny it. A long silence passed. Finally, Brandon spoke, more calmly. Look, maybe you can fix it. Apologize. Get back in his good graces. He's got influence now. People respect him. If you play it right. Natalie stood abruptly, eyes blazing. Is that what you think this is about? Damage control? Brandon shrugged, unbothered. What else would it be? She stared at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. The suits, the charm, the ambition. all of it hollow, all of it built on appearances. And for so long, she had been building herself to match him, to impress others, to rise in the right circles. "I don't think I know who you are anymore," she said. He laughed bitterly. "You don't like what you see? You built this version of yourself to fit into my world. Now you're blaming me for that." "No," she said, voice shaking. "I'm blaming myself." And for the first time in years, she meant it. Meanwhile, across town, Malcolm walked slowly through a vacant lot in South Central L.A. The sun was high overhead and the ground was still dusty and cracked, but he could already see it, what this place would become: a playground, a youth center, a tutoring space, a kitchen for free meals, a garden for the community. It wasn't just land. It was potential. Beside him, a young architect flipped through sketches. "We've got zoning approval. If we start building by next month, the center could be open by summer." Malcolm nodded, eyes never leaving the soil beneath his feet. "I want it built with dignity, not just utility. Make it feel like hope." The architect smiled. "I think we can do that." As they wrapped up the tour, Malcolm's phone buzzed. Another media request, another sponsorship offer. But he ignored it and focused on the folder in his hand. An application from a 16-year-old girl named Mariah who lived 3 blocks away. Straight-A student. Works part-time to help her mom. Wants to study computer science. He placed her application on top of the pile marked immediate funding. That was his purpose now, to find kids like her and give them the shot no one ever gave him. Later that day, back at the foundation office, Robert leaned against the door frame, sipping coffee. So he said casually, "Are you going to read it?" Malcolm looked up from his desk. "The letter," Robert added, gesturing to the sealed envelope still untouched on the corner of Malcolm's workspace. "From Natalie." Malcolm hesitated, then reached over and picked it up. The handwriting was familiar, neat, precise. He turned it over once, twice. Finally, he slid his thumb under the flap and opened it. The letter was short. "Dad, I don't deserve to call you that anymore, but I still wrote it because I don't know how else to begin. I hurt you deeply. I know that now. I let someone else define what success meant, and in doing so, I erased the one person who showed me what love truly looks like. I don't want anything from you. I just want to say I'm sorry for the words I said, for the things I didn't say, for forgetting who I was and who made me who I am. You gave me everything. I gave you nothing back but shame. And now I'm asking for a chance, not to be forgiven, but to change. If that's something you ever think I deserve." "Natalie." Malcolm stared at the letter for a long time. Robert finally asked, "Well," Malcolm folded the paper gently, carefully. "She's not asking for money, not asking to be taken back. She's asking for grace," Robert said. Malcolm nodded slowly. "We'll see." That night, Natalie sat in her apartment, no longer at Brandon's penthouse. She'd packed her things that afternoon. Brandon hadn't protested. He barely looked up from his laptop. She opened her email. Her cursor hovered over Malcolm's contact. She typed, "Subject, I don't expect a reply. Body, but thank you for reading my letter. If you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here, even if it takes years." She hit send, then closed the laptop. Across the city, Malcolm stared out his window at the skyline. He thought of the girl who had once clung to his leg on the first day of kindergarten, the girl he'd sung lullabies to through fevers, the girl who once looked at him like he was the safest place in the world. Maybe that girl was still in there somewhere, but for now, he had work to do. The city was full of forgotten children, and he refused to forget them. The lobby of the law firm that once felt like a throne room now felt cold to Natalie. She stood at the glass doors of Lockwood and Pierce, her hands trembling slightly, a manila folder pressed tightly against her chest. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked through. Each step echoed too loudly in the marble-floored hall. People turned as she passed. A few whispered, others averted their eyes. No one smiled. In her office, she shut the door quickly, her heart pounding. The past week had unraveled everything. Clients had backed out of meetings. Colleagues had grown distant. Her carefully curated reputation, the sharp, ambitious attorney with powerful connections, was cracked, because now everyone knew she was Malcolm Price's daughter, and she had disowned him. That night, Natalie sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by boxes of old photos she hadn't touched in years. She pulled out one with frayed corners, Malcolm holding her as a child, his work uniform rumpled, his smile wide despite the exhaustion in his eyes. She remembered that day. He'd worked a double shift and still made it to her school talent show. She had forgotten her lines and cried on stage. He stood in the back row and started singing the song with her, softly, until she remembered, until she believed again. Her eyes burned. She placed the photo on her fridge. Elsewhere, Malcolm walked through the nearly completed grounds of the first Price Foundation Community Hub. Children from the neighborhood had already started gathering there in the afternoons. Some kicked soccer balls across the gravel lot. Others peeked into the classroom trailers the construction team had set up early. He smiled. The laughter, the energy, it reminded him of Natalie when she was young. Before the world had taught her that wealth meant silence, that appearances mattered more than love. Robert stood beside him, hands in his jacket pockets. You made the news again. CBS picked up the segment this morning. They called you the silent builder. Kind of poetic. Malcolm chuckled. It'll pass. They'll find someone new to idolize soon enough. Maybe, Robert said. But they don't usually celebrate janitors turned investors turned community leaders. You're not just a headline, Malcolm. You're the whole story. They paused as a young boy, maybe 10, walked up with a soccer ball tucked under his arm. Hey, Mr. Price, he said shyly. Malcolm knelt. Yeah. My mom says you're the reason I can go to after-school programs now. She says you pay for the lights to stay on in the gym. Is that true? Malcolm nodded. Yeah, it's true. The boy's eyes lit up. Cool. Then he sprinted off toward the others, yelling, He's the guy. That's the guy. Robert grinned. See? The whole story. The following day, Natalie met with the firm's managing partners. It wasn't a conversation. It was a warning. We appreciate your contributions, one said carefully. But the optics lately, they're complicated. Some clients are hesitant. Another added, associating with someone perceived as ungrateful to a philanthropic figure. You don't need to explain, Natalie said, her voice even. I understand. She stood, slid her resignation across the table, and left without another word. Outside, she let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck for years. That weekend, Natalie walked to the construction site in South Central alone. No entourage, no makeup, just jeans, sneakers, and a white t-shirt. She hesitated at the edge of the lot, unsure whether she'd be welcome. Then she saw him, Malcolm, wearing work gloves, pushing a wheelbarrow full of cement mix. He moved slowly, methodically, sweat glistening on his brow. Around him, volunteers buzzed. Teenagers painting, local artists installing murals, a retired engineer wiring up solar lights. She stepped forward. Malcolm spotted her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he nodded slightly, inviting her in. She walked across the gravel. Hi, she said quietly. Hey, he replied. She looked around. This place is incredible. It will be, Malcolm said. Still got work to do. I want to help, she said. He paused, studied her, then handed her a paintbrush. The hours passed in a kind of quiet peace. Natalie painted one of the classroom walls while Malcolm installed shelving. They didn't speak much, but the silence was no longer cold. It was companionable, familiar. At lunch, they sat under the shade of a tree, sipping from paper cups. I quit the firm, she said. Malcolm nodded, figured something shifted. I've been lost for a while, she admitted. I thought I was building a life, but I was building a brand, a costume. He didn't respond, just listened. I kept thinking I had to earn love, that I had to outgrow my past, that the only way to succeed was to forget where I came from. She looked at him, her eyes filled with apology. I forgot you. I'm sorry. Malcolm exhaled, slow and steady. I forgave you before you even asked. But forgiveness doesn't mean we pretend nothing happened. I know, she said. I don't want to pretend. I want to start again. If you'll let me. He turned toward her. His eyes, always steady, softened. It's not about letting you. It's about showing up, doing the work. That's how trust grows back. She nodded. Then I'll be here. Every day if you'll have me. A small smile touched his lips. There's a fence that still needs painting. That evening, as the sun dipped low, father and daughter stood side by side, watching the golden light spill across the lot. Children played in the background. Music drifted from a speaker. Someone was grilling hot dogs nearby. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't polished. But it was real. Malcolm looked at Natalie. She looked back. No words were needed. They had miles to go, but they were walking together again. The following week moved slowly but deliberately, like the first cautious steps of someone relearning how to walk. Natalie showed up to the community hub every morning at 8. No one expected her. No one asked her to, but she kept coming. She painted fences, cleaned windows, served food, and helped sort donations. She learned the names of the volunteers, the stories of the teenagers who came from mentorship, and the mothers who dropped off their kids with shy smiles and tired eyes. Malcolm watched, saying little, but he noticed. He noticed the way Natalie no longer looked at her phone every 5 minutes, the way she kneeled to tie a child's shoelace without flinching, the way she didn't care when paint got in her hair or when her jeans were stained. She was unlearning the habits of an image-obsessed world, one brushstroke at a time. One afternoon, as they were unloading books donated from a local school district, Natalie glanced at her father from across the courtyard. "Did you ever think," she asked, arms full of boxes, "that I'd end up back here?" Malcolm looked over the rim of his glasses. "Back where?" "Here," she said, "doing this. With you." He set down a stack of books. "Not exactly, but I hoped." She gave him a faint smile. "I spent so long trying to become someone I thought I had to be. Turns out I liked her less and less." Malcolm nodded, but didn't press further. He knew enough to let truth arrive at its own pace. That evening, as the sun lowered behind the skyline, Natalie sat under the same tree where they'd eaten lunch a few days earlier. This time, she wasn't alone. A group of kids had gathered around her, asking questions about law school, about careers, about how to stand up for themselves. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to serve. And for the first time in years, she felt like herself. At home later that night, she opened her laptop. Her inbox was full of offers. Law firms tried to reclaim her name now that Malcolm's story had flipped public perception. Magazine interview requests. Influencers asking to collaborate. She deleted them all. Instead, she drafted a blog post. She titled it, "The Father I Forgot and the Lessons I'll Never Erase." By the time she hit publish, her hands were shaking. The piece went viral overnight. It wasn't polished. It wasn't strategic. It was raw. She wrote about the garage he built by hand, the piano lessons he worked overtime to pay for, the lunches he skipped so she could eat better. She wrote about the shame she carried now, not because of public judgment, but because she had silenced the most beautiful parts of her life for the sake of a version of herself that was never real. She ended the post with a single line. "I call him Malcolm in public, and I'm sorry, because to me he was always Dad." The comments flooded in. Thousands. People shared their own stories of adoptive parents, of mentors, of quiet sacrifices made by people whose names were never mentioned in speeches, but whose fingerprints were all over their success. By morning, Natalie's inbox looked different. Messages from young women saying they were afraid to be vulnerable and now found strength in her story. Messages from fathers saying they cried reading her words. Messages from complete strangers thanking her for reminding them what family meant. She forwarded none of them to her father. She knew he didn't need them. He was never in this for attention. He was building something real. At the community hub, Malcolm was already on site before sunrise. He didn't mention the article. He didn't say a word when 3 reporters showed up trying to interview him. He just kept working. Robert caught him near the storage room, chuckling. "You're a damn celebrity now." Malcolm wiped his hands on a rag. Not interested. Robert held up his phone. "She told the truth. That matters." Malcolm gave a small nod. Yeah, it does. Later that afternoon, while hammering in the last piece of signage on the front gate, the Price Community Center, Malcolm noticed a group of people approaching the lot. They weren't volunteers or neighbors. They were dressed in business suits, polished shoes, and wore practiced smiles. Leading them was Brandon Lockwood. Natalie spotted him first. Her face went stiff. Brandon raised a hand in greeting like nothing had changed. Malcolm stepped down from the ladder. "Mr. Price," Brandon said, extending his hand. "I think we might have gotten off on the wrong foot." Malcolm looked at the hand for a long moment before shaking it with just enough pressure to be polite. Brandon's voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Your story is inspiring. Truly, I wanted to stop by and see if there might be room for collaboration. I have access to capital, connections. We could expand this project beyond L.A. Natalie folded her arms, watching carefully. Malcolm tilted his head. "Appreciate the offer." Brandon smiled wider. "I think we could do something powerful together." Malcolm nodded slowly. "We are doing something powerful, with or without you." Brandon's expression didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. "Right," he said after a pause. "Well, I'll leave my card." He handed it over, but Malcolm didn't take it. He looked at Brandon with the kind of calm that comes from having nothing to prove. "You had your chance to be part of something real. You chose something else." Brandon hesitated, still holding the card. "I don't take back seats in my own story," Malcolm added. And with that, he turned and walked away. Natalie followed him a moment later. She didn't speak. She just smiled. Malcolm smiled back, because sometimes silence says everything. The community center officially opened on a Saturday morning under a clear blue sky. Local families filled the lot. Kids raced around with painted faces. A jazz band played softly near the makeshift stage. There were booths with free books, health checkups, and food trucks giving out meals donated by local businesses. Malcolm stood near the entrance, welcoming people one by one. He shook hands, offered directions, thanked volunteers. He wasn't interested in the ribbon cutting or photo ops. He was too busy helping a boy fix a broken shoelace and showing an elderly woman where the cooling station was set up under the shade. Natalie watched from a distance, standing by the mural she had helped paint. She still wasn't used to seeing her father like this, surrounded by admiration, not as a quiet man who did everything behind the curtain, but as someone now recognized in broad daylight. A girl around 8 years old tugged on Natalie's sleeve. "Are you the lady from the blog?" Natalie turned and knelt down. "Yeah, that was me." The girl smiled. "My mom said she cried when she read it. She said it made her remember her grandma." Natalie blinked fast. "Tell your mom thank you for reading." "I will. And my dad says you're brave." "I think you're brave, too." Before she could respond, the girl was gone again, chasing a balloon. Natalie stood there a while longer, trying to breathe through the knot in her throat. At noon, the music softened and people began to gather around the stage. Robert took the microphone and introduced a short program. "We're not here to celebrate concrete and paint," he began. "We're here to celebrate the kind of courage that doesn't ask for applause, the kind of legacy that doesn't come with stock options. We're here because one man decided that love doesn't end where hurt begins." He paused, looking to where Malcolm stood off to the side. Malcolm Price didn't set out to be a hero. He just kept showing up, for decades, for one girl, and now for hundreds more. Malcolm shifted uncomfortably as people clapped, but he nodded slightly in gratitude. Robert continued, "I could tell you about the $5.5 million investment, or the 3 more centers breaking ground next year. But what really matters is what you can't measure: the mentorship, the meals, the belief. You don't build futures with money alone. You build them with presence." The applause grew louder. People rose to their feet. Some whistled. Others wiped away tears. Malcolm finally walked to the stage. He didn't have notes. He never did. "I'm not good with speeches," he began, quieting the crowd. "So I'll just tell you the truth." He looked out over the families, the kids, the volunteers, and then finally his eyes found Natalie's in the crowd. "My story isn't special. Not really. I worked hard. I raised a child who wasn't mine by blood, but who was always mine in every way that counted. And I messed up sometimes. But I showed up every day. He took a breath. And when that child grew up, she made some choices. She forgot me. That hurt more than anything else I've ever experienced. But that pain led me here. A ripple of silence moved through the crowd. I'm not building centers because I want to be remembered. I'm building them because I remember what it felt like to be alone. I remember being a kid with no one to come home to. I remember being a man working 3 jobs and still not being able to afford a birthday cake. He looked down for a moment, then back up. I don't care if they write articles or shake my hand. What I care about is whether one more child has a chance to believe they matter. The clapping began again, not just out of admiration, but out of recognition, because everyone in that crowd had felt unseen at some point. And now, for just a moment, they were part of something greater. After the event, Natalie found Malcolm sitting under their usual tree, his tie loosened, his shoes dusty. She sat beside him without asking. He looked at her with a quiet smile. "You did good work today." "So, did you?" she replied. They watched the last few families leave, kids carrying bags of donated books, smiling like it was Christmas morning. She finally spoke. "I left Brandon." Malcolm didn't look surprised. "Why?" "I was chasing something that looked like success. But every time I caught it, it just felt empty. And I think deep down I knew it. I was afraid to stop running, afraid to look back." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what you had." She turned toward him. "Do you think I'm too late?" "Not just with you, but with everything." "No," he said softly. "You're right on time." She leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat that way for a long while. A little girl walked by holding her father's hand. She pointed at Malcolm. "That's him," she whispered. "The man who helped build it." The father smiled. "He's someone special." Malcolm heard, but didn't react. Natalie did. She smiled with her whole face, not the kind she used in courtrooms and photo shoots. It was the kind she hadn't worn since childhood. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point of it all. To come back to who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. On Monday morning, Natalie returned to Community Hub early, before the sun had risen. The air was cool, the city not yet awake. She unlocked the storage unit and began arranging donated supplies, crayons, notebooks, backpacks, gently used laptops. There was something satisfying about these mornings. No heels, no tight skirts, no boardroom echo. Just the soft hum of purpose. By 7 o'clock, a few kids had already arrived for tutoring. Malcolm was in the back parking lot, unloading foldable tables from a delivery truck, chatting with the driver like they were old friends. She called out to him. "Do you ever sleep?" "Don't need much," he answered, lifting a crate onto his shoulder. "I slept enough when I was invisible." The words landed softly, but she heard the weight behind them. Later that morning, while she was setting up a career board for the youth mentorship program, her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Most of the notifications these days were either journalists or opportunists. But this one was different. It was a voicemail from her former senior partner at Lockwood and Pierce, the firm she'd left behind. "Hi, Natalie. We've been following your story, and I'll be honest, we misjudged you. There's a position opening in our pro bono division, a leadership role. You're a natural fit. Think about it." She stared at the screen for a long time before locking it and sliding it back into her backpack. That evening, after the students had gone home and the lights were dimmed, she found Malcolm in the small office in the back, balancing grant applications and invoices on a whiteboard filled with scribbles. "I got offered a job today," she said, leaning in the doorway. He didn't look up right away. "That's good. They want me to run the pro bono unit, handle community cases, civil rights, tenant law, immigration." He finally met her eyes. "Sound meaningful." "I don't know if it's real," she admitted. "I don't know if they care about the work or just the headlines." Malcolm gestured to the whiteboard. "Well, the work doesn't care. The work is always real." She smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you'd say." I did say it. That night, she stayed in the office 2 hours longer, helping him finish organizing intake forms. They didn't talk about the job offer again, but something about being here, with him, with these people, with this cause, made her question what she had once thought of as career growth. Maybe climbing didn't always mean rising. Maybe, sometimes, it meant digging roots deeper. By midweek, word spread throughout the city about the center's success. A city councilwoman visited, accompanied by a local news crew. The footage of Malcolm speaking to children while handing out art kits went viral again. Only this time, it came with a segment about the economic impact, how crime rates had dipped in the neighborhood since the center opened, how high school attendance had gone up, how small businesses nearby were seeing more foot traffic. The mayor's office reached out. A quiet message was relayed through Robert. We'd love to recognize Mr. Price's work at the upcoming Civic Leadership Summit. Malcolm didn't respond right away. Robert nudged him. Could be good for expansion. City funding. More land grants. Malcolm looked tired. Not from work, but from exposure. I didn't build this place to pose for cameras, he said. Robert understood. Maybe it's not about the cameras. Maybe it's about showing people what can be done when someone gives a damn. That night, Malcolm sat on the roof of the center, alone, looking out over the street he used to avoid after dark. Now it was lit by solar lamps he had helped install. It was alive, safe, respected. Natalie joined him quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. Councilwoman said this place might be a model for the whole city, she said, sitting next to him. I heard, he said, accepting the cup. That scares me a little. She took a sip. Why? Because when they call something a model, they usually want to own it, package it, turn it into something that fits their story. She nodded slowly. Do you want to keep it small? I want to keep it real. They sat in silence, watching 2 teens below clean up trash without being asked. Natalie turned to him. Dad. He looked over. If you had the chance to go back and do it differently, would you have walked away when I started pulling away? Well, I got cold. Malcolm shook his head. You don't walk away from someone you love, even when it hurts. She blinked, eyes suddenly glossy. That's what I'm still learning. You're doing fine, he said, nudging her shoulder. I thought I had to have it all figured out by 30, she said. I'm 63 and still learning things I wish I knew at 23, he replied. They laughed. It was easy, familiar. Something between them had returned, not the old bond, but a new one, built on truth instead of dependency, on mutual respect, not obligation. Before they left the roof, she paused at the stairwell. I think I'm going to take the job, she said. Malcolm didn't say anything at first. Then he nodded, so long as it's not a detour from who you're becoming. It's not, she said. I think it's the road back. He reached out and squeezed her hand. Then they descended the stairs together, heading back to a center that had somehow become more than a building. It had become a compass, not just for a neighborhood, but for 2 people rediscovering what mattered most. It had been nearly 2 months since the community center opened, and the rhythm of life had changed, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet kind of way that builds from the inside out. Natalie now split her week between her new role at the law firm's pro bono division and her time at the Price Foundation. 3 days a week, she was in courtrooms fighting for low-income tenants. The rest of her time, she was back in the community center, teaching legal literacy workshops and helping kids draft their first resumes. Malcolm watched her settle into herself. She was no longer driven by the need to prove anything. Her life was no longer a performance for other people's approval. She was living on purpose now. But then the past came knocking. On a rainy Wednesday morning, Natalie stepped into a downtown cafe to meet an unexpected guest, Eleanor Pierce. Eleanor was a managing partner of Lockwood and Pierce, the very firm Natalie had resigned from under a cloud of shame. She was powerful, elegant, and used to having people bend when she spoke. Natalie, she said, rising from her seat and offering a practiced smile. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I was curious, Natalie replied, sitting across from her. You usually don't reach out unless there's a strategy involved. There is, Eleanor said, sipping her coffee. But this time, it benefits you more than me. Natalie leaned back. Go on. We've been watching your resurgence, Eleanor began. Your public redemption arc, as the media calls it. And we believe you're positioned to do something significant. Natalie's jaw tightened. Redemption arc? Eleanor smiled slightly. Don't take it personally. That's how these things work. People love a fall and rise story, especially when it comes with media attention. And what do you want from me? We want to bring you back, not just into the firm, into leadership. Natalie blinked. You would run your own branch, Eleanor continued. Full autonomy, full resources. And if you agree, we'll invest in expanding the Price Foundation's infrastructure nationally. You could do more with less struggle. Natalie was silent for a long moment. You want to attach your name to something pure, she said, to clean up your firm's reputation. You want to use my father's work like a badge. We want to help, Eleanor countered. The difference is, now you have the power to decide how that help looks. Natalie stood slowly, her heart thudding. When I walked away from your world, I didn't do it because I was broken. I did it because I was finally becoming whole. You can't buy that. Eleanor didn't look surprised. Think about it. The offer stands for now, but don't wait too long. The world moves fast. Natalie walked out into the drizzle with her coat clutched tight and her head spinning. The offer was real. The money was staggering. The reach, unprecedented. And for a second, she felt a familiar tug. The same pull she'd felt in her 20s, chasing a version of herself that looked good on paper. But this time, something inside her pulled back. At the center later that day, Malcolm found her sitting alone in one of the empty classrooms, staring out the window at the courtyard below. You look like someone who's been offered the world, he said, walking in. She turned slowly. Eleanor wants me back, with power, with funding. She wants to expand the foundation nationally, but it comes with her name stamped on everything. Malcolm sat beside her. And you're thinking about it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, she admitted. It's not just about me anymore. It's the kids, the people we can help. You built this whole thing with grit and heart, but what if we had the kind of money that could replicate this 10 times over? Malcolm looked at her carefully. Do you think money built this place? She hesitated. No, but money would make it easier. He nodded. It would, but it might also make it something else. She looked down. So you're saying I shouldn't do it? I'm saying only you know if the trade is worth it. Natalie sighed. How do you always manage to answer everything with riddle? Because life doesn't come with blueprints, he said. Only bricks. And you have to decide what you're building. That night, she couldn't sleep. She pulled out an old notebook from college, the kind she used to fill with goals and to-do lists. On the first page, she had written, Become someone people listen to. She looked at that line for a long time before crossing it out. Then she wrote underneath it, Become someone worth listening to. The next morning, she called Eleanor. I'm not coming back, she said, but thank you. Eleanor's silence was long. That's disappointing. It's a relief, Natalie replied. She hung up before Eleanor could respond. Later that week, a check arrived at the foundation, anonymous with a note that read, No strings attached, just admiration. The amount, $250,000. Malcolm showed Natalie the envelope. You think this is a bribe? No, she said, reading the handwriting. I think it's a thank you. The money was real, but the movement was growing on its own now. Malcolm didn't need a brand. He had people, and people were beginning to believe again, not just in systems, but in each other. At the end of the day, Natalie sat with Malcolm on the porch of the center, sipping lemonade, watching kids ride donated bikes down the sidewalk. She smiled. I said no. He smiled back. I figured you would. She nudged his arm. You always know how things will go, don't you? He shook his head. No, I just know you. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that no longer felt awkward. It felt earned. Natalie looked at him. Do you think I'm ready to lead this with you? You've already been leading, Malcolm said. Now you're just owning it. She nodded slowly, the weight of decision settling in her chest, but not as a burden, as a promise. She had been offered the world again. But this time, she had chosen something better. Fall arrived slowly in Los Angeles, more symbolic than seasonal. The air cooled just slightly. The skies turned a shade grayer. But inside the Price Foundation, things remained alive and burning bright. By now, the center was a pillar in the neighborhood. 300 students had registered for after-school programs. Dozens of job seekers were receiving weekly coaching. Local businesses had begun to offer internships to teens who used to be ignored. But just as things were settling into a rhythm, the storm hit. It started as a single headline in a clickbait blog. Millionaire janitor's charity under investigation for tax irregularities. Within hours, the post was picked up by 3 more outlets, each one more sensational than the last. Malcolm was at the front of the center setting up folding chairs for a town hall when Robert burst through the door, phone in hand. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice tight. Malcolm looked up. "How bad?" Robert handed him the phone. "It's blowing up." Malcolm scrolled. The article featured a grainy photo of him walking out of a bank, cropped to make it look ominous. The content was filled with speculation, half-truths, and completely false accusations. An anonymous source claimed the foundation funneled donations into personal investments, citing nothing specific. No evidence, just enough innuendo to cause doubt. Natalie read the article on her laptop in the office, her face drained of color. "It's coordinated," she said as Robert walked in. "Someone fed them this." "Think it's a firm?" Robert asked. Natalie hesitated. "Maybe. Or someone else who didn't like us turning down their money." She didn't say Brandon's name, but they all thought it. Malcolm stood by the door, arms folded, unreadable. "We didn't do anything wrong," Robert said firmly. "But perception can be louder than facts," Natalie replied, "especially when money's involved." That afternoon, the city council postponed a vote on funding the second Price Center in East Hollywood. The mayor's office issued a generic statement about transparency. A local news channel aired a segment with dramatic music and phrases like "under scrutiny." Malcolm refused all interview requests. Natalie wanted to fight back immediately, issue statements, hire a PR team, threaten lawsuits. But Malcolm asked for one day. "Let them run their headlines," he said. "Tomorrow we show them who we are." The next morning, he and Natalie walked into Foundation together before sunrise. They opened the doors early. Invited everyone, students, parents, volunteers, neighbors. And they didn't make a statement to the press. They made it to the people. They held the town hall anyway. The room was packed. Folding chairs ran out. People stood against the walls, in the doorways, out on the sidewalk. Malcolm stepped forward with a single sheet of paper. "I know some of you have seen things online," he began, his voice calm and clear. "And I want to speak to you directly, not through a microphone or headline." He held up the sheet. "These are our financial records. Every cent we've spent is accounted for. Every donation has gone into this building, these programs, your kids." He placed the paper on a table beside him. "You're welcome to look at it. Ask questions. Demand more. This place belongs to you." There was silence, then a slow ripple of clapping, then more. Soon, the room shook with applause. Natalie stepped up next. "Some people thought we were vulnerable because we weren't backed by billionaires or politicians. But what they forgot is that we're backed by something stronger. Community, trust, proof." A woman stood up. "My son hasn't missed a day of school since the center opened. Before this, I couldn't get him to even carry a backpack." A teenager raised his hand. "I got my first paycheck last week. From the job you helped me get. Ain't no blog post gonna take that away." A retired veteran who'd been volunteering security spoke next. "They want to come down here with cameras and slander? Let them. I know what I see. I see lives changing." Dozens more stood, one by one, people from every walk of life. The press had their narrative, but the people had a different one. By the end of the week, a group of local business owners and community leaders had published an open letter defending the foundation. Several prominent journalists who respected Natalie's legal work fact-checked the claims and dismantled them line by line. One blogger issued a retraction. Another admitted they were paid anonymously to post. The noise faded, but Malcolm's work didn't. He never addressed it again, never gloated, never said, "I told you so." He just kept building. That Sunday, Natalie and Malcolm sat in the office, going over applications for winter programs. They'd received triple the number they could accept. "We'll need to scale," Natalie said. "Which means more staff," Malcolm replied. "And probably more space," she added. He leaned back in his chair. "You still thinking about national expansion?" She smiled. "Not yet, but I'm thinking about what happens if we don't. There are kids like these in every corner of this country, waiting, wasting." Malcolm looked at her with quiet pride. "Then I guess we got more work to do." She glanced at the framed photo on the wall, her and Malcolm standing at the ribbon cutting. It had been taken moments before the ceremony. They weren't posing, just laughing. And that moment, unplanned, unscripted, had become the heart of the center. "What do they come after us again?" she asked. "They will," he said simply. "But they'll lose again, because we're not selling anything. We're showing up. Every day. That's the difference." She nodded slowly. "I'm ready." He smiled. "You've been ready for a while." She leaned back, looked around the room filled with posters, books, hand-drawn art from local kids, white boards with lesson plans and budget charts. A place born from love, fortified by truth, built not to impress, but to last. Winter in Los Angeles didn't come with snow or heavy coats, but the air turned crisp and the sky took on a paler hue. At the Price Community Center, holiday decorations went up early. Paper snowflakes lined the windows. Children had drawn murals of warm fires and twinkling lights. Volunteers wrapped donated gifts in a room that now doubled as a small seasonal workshop. Natalie stood in the main hallway, a clipboard in hand, overseeing the final checklist for the center's winter celebration. For many of the kids and their families, it would be the only holiday event they could attend. No one would leave empty-handed. No one would feel forgotten. She turned just as Malcolm walked in, arms full of boxes, his face red from the cold. "You're late," she teased. "You're bolder than you used to be," he shot back. They grinned at each other. The lobby transformed throughout the day. A group of teens set up folding tables with cocoa and cookies. Parents brought in crock pots with food from every culture: tamales, samosas, fried chicken, rice cakes, and sweet potato pie. Musicians tuned their instruments in the back corner, where the makeshift stage had been set up with string lights. By 5 o'clock, the place buzzed with laughter and music. Kids ran around showing off face paint and new winter coats. Neighbors hugged each other. Old friends reunited. Strangers became family for a night. Malcolm moved through the crowd quietly, shaking hands, helping lift chairs, checking on the elderly guests. He didn't give a speech. He didn't ask for thanks. He simply watched it all unfold with a look in his eyes that said, this is what it was all for. Natalie stood near the entrance, looking out at the community they'd helped build. Her heart was full in a way that didn't need recognition. She was content to witness it, until she turned and saw a familiar face at the edge of the crowd. It was Brandon. He wasn't dressed in his usual suit. He wore a black peacoat and jeans, blending in, hands in his pockets. He stood alone, not moving forward, not trying to interrupt, just watching. Natalie approached him slowly. "I wasn't expecting you here," she said evenly. "I didn't come to cause trouble," he replied. I read about what you've done, what your dad's done." She didn't correct him. He had said, "Your dad," like it was finally true. "I wanted to see it," he added. "Not the photos, not the headlines. The real thing." She glanced over her shoulder at the room filled with light and life. "This is it," she said. "No cameras, no curated narratives, just people." Brandon nodded. "You look happier than I've ever seen you." "I am." He looked down. "I think I was jealous, not just of your connection with him, but how grounded you became when you let go of everything else." Natalie folded her arms. "Jealousy isn't an excuse for cruelty." "No, it's not," he admitted. "I was wrong. About him. About you. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to say I see it now. She searched his face. For the first time, he wasn't calculating. He was just human. "I'm glad you came," she said finally. "I hope it helps you find your own version of this." He smiled, a little sad, a little grateful. "Take care of him." "I will." He turned and disappeared into the night, and she felt no anger in his wake, only closure. Later that evening, Natalie stood on a small stage, microphone in hand, with Malcolm beside her. She tapped the mic gently, drawing the crowd's attention. "We wanted to say thank you," she began. "Thank you for trusting us, for showing up, for believing in something that wasn't polished or perfect, but that was always real." Cheers rang out, a few whistles. Malcolm raised his hand slightly to quiet them. "I'm not a man of many words," he said, "so I'll keep this simple." He looked around the room, at faces young and old, brown and white, joyful and tearful. "You built this," he said, "and as long as you keep showing up for each other, it'll never fall." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, as the room began to thin and the music slowed, Natalie and Malcolm found themselves alone in the courtyard behind the center. The string lights glowed above them, casting soft halos of amber light. "You think she would have been proud?" Natalie asked, staring at the sky. "Your mother?" Malcolm asked gently. Natalie nodded. Malcolm thought for a long moment. "She'd be more than proud. She'd be amazed, not just by what you've done, but by who you've become." A soft wind rustled the trees. "She'd say you finally came home." Natalie's voice broke. "I feel like I did." He put an arm around her shoulder. They stood there in the quiet for a while, father and daughter, no longer separated by secrets or status or shame. Just two people, holding each other in a moment that had taken a lifetime to arrive. Inside, a child laughed. Someone strummed a final note on a guitar. And the world, in that tiny corner of Los Angeles, felt just a little more whole. I used to think success meant walking as far away from your past as you could. That's what I thought, honestly, for a long time. But then I came across this story, Malcolm and Natalie, and it stopped me. It didn't scream for attention. It didn't have explosions or some dramatic twist. But it stayed with me in a way most stories don't. It's not flashy, but it's real. Maybe too real, because it's not about villains and heroes. It's about people, flawed, scared, proud, and human. And when a story holds up a mirror like that, you can't help but look at your own reflection a little longer. Natalie was a woman who had everything, on paper. A big career, a rich fiancé, a life most people would envy. And somewhere along the way, she forgot the man who made all of it possible. Not her biological father. No, but the man who became her father through every sacrifice he made. Malcolm, he wasn't wealthy. At least, not in the way the world measures it. He was a janitor, a driver, a man who chose to give up everything for a child who wasn't his. He gave her the kind of love that didn't demand attention. It just showed up, quiet, constant, faithful, and then she threw him out of her life like he was nothing. Said he didn't fit in her world anymore. You know, that hit something deep, because I've seen it happen. Maybe not with such cruelty, but in silence, in distance, in how we sometimes shrink the people who build us, just so we can feel taller. But Malcolm didn't lash out. He didn't beg her to reconsider. He walked away with dignity, carrying not just a suitcase, but a lifetime of love unreturned. And he didn't just survive. He built something. He turned his pain into purpose, turned his heartbreak into hope for others. He took all the years he spent in the background and used them to step forward, not in search of revenge, but in service of something bigger. That part made me sit back. Because you know what's harder than staying angry? Choosing to love anyway. And Natalie, when she finally saw the truth, she didn't just say, "I'm sorry." She got her hands dirty. She showed up. She didn't beg for her father's forgiveness. She earned it one act at a time. And maybe that's what the story is about in the end. Not success, not redemption, but presence, the power of showing up. It made me ask myself some hard questions. Have I ever ignored someone who quietly gave everything for me? Have I spent my life trying to look impressive, while forgetting the people who helped me stand up in the first place? And Could I forgive someone who turned their back on me? Not with words, but with grace? This story reminded me that we all have a Malcolm somewhere in our lives. Someone who didn't have to help, but did. Someone who stayed up late, who paid the bill, who held the line when everything else was falling apart. Maybe it's a parent, maybe a grandparent, maybe a teacher, a mentor, a neighbor, and maybe we never said thank you. Maybe we said something worse. Maybe we disappeared. But here's the beautiful part. It's not too late. That's the other thing this story teaches us. Change doesn't have to come in grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with a visit, a message, a step back into a life you left behind. And if you've been Malcolm, if you've given and been forgotten, this story is for you too. Because your value isn't measured by how loudly they cheer for you. It's in the lives you touched, the hearts you helped beat, the bridges you held up when no one else even saw the river. You don't need the world to know your name to leave behind something sacred. You just have to keep showing up. And if someone like Natalie can return, can undo years of pride and shame with honesty and work, then maybe someone in your life can too. I don't know where you are when you're reading this, but if there's someone you've forgotten to thank, someone you've wronged, or someone who gave you everything and never asked for anything back, call them, go to them, even if it's awkward, even if it's been years, even if they're no longer around. Write them a letter anyway. Speak it into the quiet. Trust me, it matters. And if you're carrying hurt, if you're waiting for someone to apologize, let this story remind you. Healing isn't about erasing the pain. It's about making peace with it and building something better from the ashes. That's what Malcolm did. And that's what we can do, too. Not all of us will leave behind a foundation or a building or $1 million donation, but we can all leave behind love that echoes. That's the real legacy. So don't wait. Say the words. Take the step. Be the person someone else can point to and say, that's the one. That's the one who helped me believe again. Because stories like this, they don't end. They ripple. And the next chapter, it's yours.